What's up, guys? Welcome to this tutorial. This tutorial is going to be focused on creating and using layers. Last tutorial we went over all the menus of the application, the location of all the tools. Now it's time to get started on a project. The only way to get started on a project is to start doing your artwork and animating, right? So the only way that can happen is through layers. So layers serve as the medium for which all of your animation will take place in this application. Down in the lower right-hand corner, there is your layers palette. By default, when you open up a new project, there is one layer already placed in the palette. This is a vector layer. This shape right here indicates that it's a vector layer. Without any layers here in this palette, you have no venue to actually start any artwork or import images or movies or audio. You have to do everything in terms of layers. So let me just show you the various kinds of layers that actually exist. Right here, as I already mentioned, is a vector layer. This means that this will be essentially a drawing that you create in this program, or you import a drawing that was created in another program in which Moho can read as a vector. That will be associated a lot with these drawing and fill tools. You can create them from scratch. You can create them, I believe, in Adobe, Photoshop, things like that. But let's open up this. This icon here is the button for adding a new layer. And this will show us all the various layers that you can add to your project. So when you click on this icon, you have all the listed layers that exist in this program. All of these layers together are everything you need to create 2D animation in Moho. So as we already talked about, vectors are associated with your actual drawings and creations that you make from scratch. The next one is image, and image can be anything from JPEG, PNG. I would highly recommend, if you're going to use images, to use PNG files whenever you can. Image sequences are basically a series of images. So JPEGs or PNG files, but you import a sequence of them. So there are multiple images. Group layers are very important. They're basically just folders that you put groups of layers inside of. And the reason that's as important is because when you have a bunch of layers grouped together, you can animate them all together. You can move them as one, and you can perform certain operations on a group of layers at a time. And you'll see as you become more advanced why that is so important. This is basically the same sort of thing, except you can press this button when you have selected multiple layers, and then you hit this one and it automatically groups those layers together. That's group with selection. Bone layers are essentially a group layer, but it's a special kind of group layer, which Moho reads as a layer that allows you to add bones, and in Toon Boom they call them deformers. It's a layer that allows you to add bones to your artwork, and you can use those bones to bind to your artwork. Moho reads the layer and allows for you to animate with bones or so-called deformers. Switch layers are really cool layers. They allow you to use different sets of artwork at different times in your animation. With the click of a button, you can just change your artwork to a different pose or a different thing that you created. And frame by frame layers are basically switch layers, except that they allow you to change your artwork at any time during your animation. It's basically designed for traditional animation where you create the artwork as you go. And so that way, if you're at frame 1, you can add new things to your artwork, and then frame 2, frame 3, frame 4, you can continue to modify that artwork as you go. Whereas a vector layer, you create all your artwork at frame 0, and then you manipulate that same artwork over time, but you can't really add or take away from it as you go. Particle layers are awesome. They allow you to create an object that is generated over and over and over by the program, and then it's used for things like simulating rain or water or fire, things that move with lots of detail inside them, like fires have lots of particles moving in them. And so this allows you to create those effects. Note layer is basically just what it says. It's a way of creating notes in your animation to remind yourself of something. Audio layers are audio layers. You can import music or talking or any sort of sound that you want on your animation. Patch layers are a way of blending two layers together So say you are drawing on a vector layer and you are drawing the upper arm of someone on one layer and then the lower arm of that same person on another layer. Well, you may want to blend those together so they look like they are one shape, and a patch layer is how you do that. Text layer is obviously a way of adding text to your animation. You can add word balloons or word bubbles. Anyway, so that's all the layers that you can use in this program. Okay, so this first button up here, as we discussed already, is to add a new layer. You click that and you get the layer options that you want to add a new layer, and it simply just adds the layer above the one that you have selected. So if I wanted to group, it'll just put that above here. This one is duplicate layer. You'll use this a lot because when you're creating a body part and you need two of them, you can just duplicate the layer and then suddenly you have two, and then you can flip the other one if it needs to be symmetrical or whatever. So you click that button and then it duplicates the layer that I had selected. This one is reference layer. It is basically a way of duplicating your layer, but the purpose of it is for the duplicated layer to follow all the animations and things that you have done with the original layer. So for instance, if you wanted to create two people dancing in tandem, like a line dance sort of thing, that you want them all to be doing the same thing. The best way to do that is to only animate one of those characters, and then you can reference that character. It duplicates it and references it, and so the duplicated layer just follows all the animations that you did for the first layer. And then of course this little trash can is a way of deleting layers. You go to the next one. This is layer settings. You can either select a layer and press this to pull up your settings dialog box window, or you can double click the layer. Either way. And then when you go to your layer settings, this has just a ton of different sorts of settings that you will use to make your animations better and add effects and all sorts of things. Lastly, up here is this layer comps button. This is used if you want to group and categorize your layers. Basically, the biggest use for this button is for compositing, like if you want to export a group of layers that fit a certain category like scenery or characters, and that way you can keep it together for various compositing tasks that you might do in another program. And as your animation gets more complex, you will use this tool here. You can end up having hundreds of layers in an animation, and so finding those layers to edit them and change them or animate them can be difficult. And so you can filter and search for layers by using the filter criteria and then the search box here. And the last thing you might use here is, as with any computer program, right-clicking offers you a range of choices based on the layer. It allows you access to these options that you immediately need when you're animating. And in the future tutorials that I'll be doing, I'll start going through these layers and giving examples of how they operate in the program. For this tutorial, we'll add another vector layer. So now we have two vector layers, and you can choose either one, and you can start drawing artwork on there. You just pick a drawing tool, and then you can start doing the things that you want to do. You can pick different shapes, then you can go to the other layer and you can draw layers on that shape, and these are different layers, and I'm just doing a quick version of showing you how basic shapes in drawing go. And then you can erase from that. Here's something to note here. Each layer has these eyeballs on it. You can show each layer at a time, so that way you're only seeing one at a time. So I didn't want to leave you hanging high and dry without giving you a way of starting your project. So the best way to get started in Moho with artwork really is just start playing around with your vector layers, because you can start drawing in it. But you can animate images and all those other things and start working with those other layers too. But if you're new to Moho, this is the best way to get familiarized with the tools and layers. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Give it a like, a thumbs up, leave a comment on what you liked about it and what you'd like to see in the future. But thank you for watching. Take care.